Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Mosaic Podcast. Today must be International Day. I was speaking earlier today to people who have chosen a nomadic life and are living in a boat now off the coast of Grenada. Our internet connection went down, so we couldn't finish that interview. We will finish it later, but when you hear it, it will all be whole. And now I am speaking with the beautiful Monica Pelayo, who, did I say your last name correctly?
Yeah, with a no, Pelayo.
Pelayo. Okay. And she is in Spain. Is that where you are?
Yeah, in Madrid.
She's in Madrid, Spain. So we are universally talking around the world to people that are doing incredible things. Let me just give you a little, I'm not a big bio guy, but let me just give you a little bit of the bio so you have a sense of who we're talking to. And then I want to just jump into it. Monica is a certified integrative life coach. She's experienced in shadow work, and she's an expert in it, interestingly enough. And she's the mother of two boys. She's been a student in the Course of Miracles for over 2 decades and was personally trained in the work of the shadow by Debbie Ford. Blah, blah, blah. Beautiful.
Which you met.
I know. I met Debbie Ford. Yeah. And I'm friends with her sister, Ariel. And so Debbie went way before her time. And we're all of us who knew her are still sad to this day that she's not around. So for her to have protégés that are still continuing to do her work is beautiful. And so Monica is one of those people. But Monica and I don't know quite how we met. I saw her on Facebook. It was her birthday or something happened. And I just had this heart pull to say, I've got to talk to this woman. And we had a conversation, and she was magnificent, as you're going to hear soon. And she was kind enough to offer me a session, and where I would take a look at my shadow. And I was, pretty resistant at first, because who wants to look at that part of me? In my book, The Mosaic, I write about him as the beast. And he's a character that Mo meets along his journey. And the beast is somebody that I had locked up in my closet for a long time because he embarrassed me. He was my passion. He was my fire. He was my life force. But he was also very unpredictable. And he would do things that got me into a lot of trouble. And I pushed aside all of my passion and all of my desire, and I locked him in a closet. But if you know the beast like I know the beast now, he wasn't happy there. And he started to growl and break out. And finally, he completely broke out, and I had to deal with him. I'm still dealing with him. And part of the work that Monica did with me was helping me take another look at him, because I thought I might have seen more than I had, but I hadn't. I can't recommend her enough to people who are interested in looking at that side of themselves that they don't want to look at. Because whether we look at it or not, it's there. And it influences the work we do and the way we show up and the way we are in our relationships and the way we are in everything we do, until we love and accept them and integrate them into our life like a mosaic, putting all those pieces together. So this is not a monologue. This is an interview, and I'm sorry for taking so long. Monica, welcome to the Mosaic Podcast. It is such an honor to have you.
Thank you. That was such a beautiful intro. Oh my gosh, I feel so blessed. Thank you. It's an honor to be here.
Well, it's fabulous to have you, and I look forward to introducing you to the people who listen to the show. And I literally hope that you will get lots of phone calls from people wanting to do some work with you to shine some light on this shadow.
Thank you.
Before we get involved in your work, what did your parents do when you were growing up?
Well, my father, he passed away when I was 4. So wow. I know he had a few things going on. And my mom got pretty sick when I was 10. But what I know is that my father, which is an interesting story, because my father came from a really good family in Mexico, in Guadalajara, and they're from the Pelayos, which is in Mexico and Spain. It's like almost like a royalty last name in those times, right? Because it came from the King Pelayo and all that stuff. So he was pretty, good. He was really young, and he started dating my mom, and my mom was this Mexican, a dark skin, beautiful woman, but she was dark, and they were white looking. And it's interesting that I'm having this conversation. I wasn't expecting you to ask me this question, and it was really interesting because he fell in love with my mom, and my mom was working in a they used to call it discotheque, but it's where they sell the vinyl,
Records.
what do you call them? Records. Yeah, the vinyl records. And so she met him there in Guadalajara, and he fell in love and whatever. And his family disowned him.
Wow.
Because why is he with this Indian? She was an Indian, but I'm sure she had a lot of Indian blood, and I come from a lot of Indian blood, I'm sure. And so they disowned him and whatever. And then he decided he wanted to, have a better life, and he moved to California because his twin sister lived in California, and she was a nurse. And so she said, just come over, and I mean, they're not going to help you. So he had to go from like a really, financial stability with his family to having nothing. And so he went to California, and he literally started as a gardener. And I mean, it lasted he was still had that upbringing of like, oh my God, how could I, right? He still had that. So he was there like for a few weeks and whatever. And then he started hiring people, and then he started a business. And then, he had like this little empire of gardening and had all these people working for him. And then he became pretty successful in what he was doing. And then my mom came because he went to California first, and then my mom went, and then my sister was born, I was born. And then when I was about almost 4 years old, he decided we were going to go back to Guadalajara because he had some businesses there, and opened up a jewelry store or whatever, something like that. And he ended up passing away. I think he was about, I don't know if he was in his 30s or 30.
Wow.
I don't know I don't remember because I was so little. And, my mom then, when I was 10 years old, she had a brain tumor, and it was like 25% of her brain had the brain tumor. So she really couldn't work or anything, but we went back to California after he passed away. And then when I was 10 years old, she got sick until she died when I was 21.
Wow.
Yeah, so she didn't really do much work there.
So we share something that we didn't know until this call, because both my parents passed away. They passed away 2 years apart on the same day. My dad when I was 13, and my mom when I was 15. And both of them passed away on the 4th of July, which is Independence Day here in America. So that was what really propelled me. What did that do to you? What did losing your dad that early and losing your mom, what did that bring out in you?
Well, when I was 4 years old, I don't really remember, much. I remember just kind of the good stuff that I, spent with my mom. And it was like a, somewhat good childhood. All I knew, it was when she got sick where it did a lot to me. Like maybe not in the moment, but I became very afraid of, the world, because my mom had showed me a world, such a loving world.
Yeah.
That it was kind of impossible that someone wasn't going to love me, right? Because she loves me so much. I'm like, that's the normal, right? And so when she started getting sick, and then I saw how people treated her, and she used to have, she was pretty financially in a good place, and so it was really interesting because I was able to see, friendships kind of disappear, and, just family and all the stuff. And then I just started noticing, I'm like, what is happening? So like everything, I didn't have her to explain to me anymore. And then I started just seeing another side of people and humanity and all the sorts of things. And obviously I felt that, you know, if something happened to her, like no one was going to love me. Right. And more because
Wow.
moms, you know, I don't know why we say this stuff, but we say things like, nobody's going to love you like your mother. Right. You know,
Right.
and there's such a truth
Right.
to that. But also we have to tell our children that they're not going to love you like a mother. They're going to love you like a friend. They're going to love
Yeah.
you like a husband.
Yeah.
They're going to like, we need to just make sure whatever mom's listening to make sure that you add that at the end,
Yeah.
because then, you know, in my process, it was like, when she's gone, then nobody's going to love me.
Right.
Like
Right. No,
there's
totally.
not going to be a true love. Right.
I think there's so many people that are listening that can relate to that and understand that. And I just want to highlight for listeners just a few things that we unwrap as we're talking here of how, first of all, how we look at people and how we see people and how their professions define who we are, or how our illness or our health or how our beauty or our lack of beauty define us in the eyes of people, and how quickly things can change from one moment to another. Because one of the things that I always say in the Mosaic is we are one connection, one piece, one idea, one situation away from our whole world either exploding or shattering or opening up or falling in love or becoming a new reality. And I think in even just listening to a couple minutes of Monica speaking, you can see how worlds change and what we do with that information. Part of what's so interesting about the work she does, which is shadow, is so much of that information we bury aside because we don't want to really look at it, and it's painful to look at. Why would we want to look at it? Because what we try and do is avoid that pain. So let's pause for a minute, because I can see how easy I just want to jump into the work you do. So when I get, when your mom passed away, you had this feeling of, how will I ever be loved? Because mom loved me so much and no one will ever love me like my mom. Did you remember having any of those feelings when your dad passed away, or was he just gone or working so much?
Yeah. Well, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm going to tell you this story, Danny. Oh my God, you know how many podcasts I do, and I never do this, but I'm going to do this.
I
So,
love it.
I love it too. It's so different. It's so different. So my dad dies when I was 4. So I turn in September. It's so funny I'm talking about it. Okay, let me breathe it. Okay, so I was 4 years old when he passed away. September 4th was my birthday, and September 27th he died. Wow. And so everybody told, and so, you know, mind you that we were in Mexico. So in Mexico, we don't have this thing with the death as much of, you know, other people in other countries. They're more afraid of it. And we're like, oh, you know, they go to another world, you know, November 2nd, we feed them, we talk to them. It's just kind of, we have just a different culture when it comes to death. So, but also we're really open on, you know, people seeing certain things, and it's just something that we have in our culture. But for me, after he passed away, I was sleeping. I woke up, and, you know, sometimes when he couldn't sleep or something, he would come and he would carry me, and he would take me to bed with my mom and him. And my mom would always get upset. It's like, leave her alone. Right. And so there was this one night that he came over, and I saw him, and I could see him perfectly right now. Like it's so perfect, engraved in my head. And he was in the doorway. He was in the doorway, and he was kind of leaning with his arm, and he was like made of all these little dots, you know, like when it's at night, and then you see little dots. But he was made, and he was like in his underwear and his boxers, white boxers, I remember. And he was looking at me with such love, you know, like when your parents look at you like, oh, I can't love you so much. You know, I look at my kids like that, and I'm like, oh my God, how can I love you this much? And it's kind of like that look. And I saw him. I don't remember him carrying me or anything. I just remember seeing him. And the next day I woke up in my mom's room, and my mom's like, how did you come? You know, I was 4 years old, and you had to like go, because the house was pretty big. And she's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, my dad brought me. And she's like, no, daddy couldn't have brought you. He's in heaven. I'm like, I know he came
Wow.
and I saw him.
Wow.
Because, if you're 4 years old, you don't understand what heaven is, or you don't know that you don't come back from there, or whatever it is. So when I knew there was something going on is when suddenly my mom's godmother, my aunt, my whatever, and they set me on there like, tell Auntie what you saw. And I'm like, what, when? And they're like, Daddy. And I'm like, okay. So my dad and whatever, and they're like, oh, Dios mío. And I'm like, everybody's like, bendito Dios, por favor. And everybody was just like, really like, and I'm like, I couldn't understand what, but I knew there was something. Oh, you just muted yourself, Danny, I think.
Yes, I did. My wife just came home, so I was just telling her.
Okay. I saw your lips moving. So anyways, so I knew that there was something there that maybe it wasn't normal, but nobody really talked about it anymore. And I didn't see him again, like nothing happened. I was able to see sometimes like images of other people and whatever, but we never discussed that until I was like, maybe when you do your communion, it would be like 8 years old or something. And I was doing, they were preparing me for my first communion because my family was Catholic. And I remember the lady that was doing the catechism, and they were like, oh, and, is your dad? And I'm like, yeah, but, I saw him, and sometimes I see him, and, and I'm like, and it's like this lady that's here, that it's your mom, and she loves you and whatever. And she starts crying, and I'm like, oh, and that's when I realized that there was something wrong, because they talked to my mom. And then they had a conversation with me to tell me that this was not of God, and this was not of Jesus, and this is, of, something, entities, and, kind of, it was like a dark, evil thing, and it could be the devil. So, so they said that I should, pray and ask Jesus to make it go away. And that had been my prayer from when I was 4 till I was about 28.
Wow. Wow.
So, and then I met a friend of yours too, that I think you knew, when I was about 28, I got really sick. I was actually graduating from Debbie's integration program. And I went
That's Debbie Ford, right?
Debbie Ford, yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to a party, and I don't know why I'm like going all the way here, but anyway, so I went to a Christmas party, but I had been sick. I started getting like really bad panic attacks, and like really, it was like 3 months it was really, really bad, that I felt like I was dying. And but a friend of mine, my friend George and Evie, were celebrating something, and they had people from Hay House, because they do the cruises for Hay House.
Right.
And so I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go. And I went, and James Van Prague was there.
Wow. Right.
And I was like sending up, we were having a drink, and I was there by my husband at the time. And it was really interesting, because he comes over and he goes, and you know how he is, right? And he's like, I know who you are, and I know what you can see.
Wow.
And I was like, ugh. And I started shaking, and I said, with tears in my eyes, and it was like the first moment of accepting that, right? And I said, how can I make it go away?
Wow.
And he said, oh, darling, that will never go away. And that's why you're sick. Wow.
Wow.
And I'm like, excuse me, went to the bathroom, cried my eyes out, and then came out like nothing happening and whatever. So that's like, so the shadow, like something you put away, you show it, and you're like, oh, I'm going to act like nothing. I danced it all out and whatever. But when I went back, I thought, like, I want to get better. I don't know where. this anxieties are coming back and whatever, but like whoever wants to talk to me. And then, you know, a lot of things started opening. And I mean, I never tell people that I can see. I mean, but in my sessions, for example, if we're talking and somebody's there and they're saying like, well, ask them of this because
Right.
and, you know, it depends on their energy. And I'll be like, oh, and how many brothers and sisters do you have?
Yeah.
Do you have a brother? Oh, okay. And how did you get along with him and whatever? And I'm like, it's part of the coaching, right?
Right.
But
Right.
trying not to give so much attention to that. But I do now use it. The shadows, you always use these
Yeah.
aspects of you instead of them using you with panic attacks, right? So that
Yeah.
was my kind of my situation.
So let me interrupt you just for a minute because
Yeah.
I want to, one of the things that's really interesting for me, and I learned this from my developmentally delayed daughter, is that everything in the world wants to speak to us. Everything. My daughter can't speak like you and I are speaking, so she tries to say something. Hold on 1 minute. Baby, can you not do that now? I'm sorry. My wife just came home with groceries, so she's unpacking everything, trying to be as quiet as she possibly can, but I hear her in the background. So my daughter, she can't speak like you and I speak, but because I've known her for 30 years, I most of the time understand what she's trying to say in her garbled language that she speaks, but sometimes I don't. And when I try to understand her and I don't understand her, she gets frustrated and she'll raise her voice and she'll yell. And when she yells and I don't understand her because it's not the volume that she's speaking in, it's the clarity, then she'll get upset and she'll throw a tantrum. And it doesn't matter where we are. It could be in a restaurant, a line that we're waiting in. It could be in a car where we're driving. It could be in a party that we're sitting at with people. She'll throw a tantrum. And she just wants me to understand. And when the tantrum doesn't work, she'll come running at me and try and rip my shirt or bite me. And what I realized over the time is that every single person I know does exactly that same thing. And we do it inside ourselves also. And I just wanted to highlight, because when we stop listening to the voices that are speaking to us, they have to find a way to have voice. My voice is speaking to me now how I'm protecting myself with my body and the pain that I feel in my body. It's just telling my body's telling me there's something it wants me to do that I'm not listening to. And it's so interesting in your situation that's what the James would say to you. That's maybe why you're sick, or that is why you're sick, because you're not listening. And so, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. It's really the type of interview that I like to do, because I want people to know you, not just the work you do.
And I love it that you give me that space, because normally they would ask these questions, you know, like, what made you go into shadow, or what is that moment? And I always think about it. I'm like, well, you know, I just didn't want to suffer anymore because I didn't have my mom, whatever. But I've never put it like that. And, you know, maybe this is opening a new way of me talking about it.
Yeah, completely.
In such a, in a more vulnerable and powerful way. And I appreciate
there's no wonder.
that space. Yeah.
Absolutely. But there's no wonder why you would have gone in. Look at what happened to you. I mean, like, at a certain point, you were face to face with your beast, your shadow, whatever you want to call it. And if you don't look at it, you have the possibility of getting sick, or staying sick, or not healing. And so for you, the amount of healing that's happened from you being able to do this work on yourself and then also on others is just so beautiful. But one of the things that I like so much about this podcast is that I want to invite people to see what we don't see. Like, so many people go through life and they don't even think that could be possible, of why they're feeling pain, or why they're sick, or why that something inside of them is speaking to them, or they're not looking at the totality of who they are. They're just looking at one part. And when we try and keep that persona, it can't last forever. It's not possible.
Wait, I think we do. I do really believe that we come here for a mission. And I do believe that the universe conspires to our happiness. And I do believe that something good's going to come out of all of this. And it's such, my faith and trust in that I've noticed that when they say, one door closes, another one open, but when certain things happen to us and that we don't feel it's the right thing or it should have happened differently, or one of the main things I would ask myself, like, why is this happening to me? When I was so sick, I mean, I lasted sick a long time, and these were like huge panic attacks where I couldn't be alone, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't sleep more than 20 minutes, 3 months like that.
Wow.
So I would sleep 20 minutes, wake up, 20 minutes, wake up, 20 minutes, wake up, like 3 months of that. Couldn't work, couldn't do anything. I lost it, and I would have never thought it was that, right? And I never really thought it was that. Even after, I was like, oh, well, I'm getting better because I'm doing all this other stuff. But I could see now, looking back, is this part of me saying, you need to integrate this part of you. This is a huge part of you. And it's funny because at 44 that I am now, which I just turned 44.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
That's how we met, by the way.
Yes, it's my birthday. What are the things that I'm looking at right now, because you do a little bit of a review. I do a little bit of review when, when it's my birthday, and the review that I see now, and having this conversation with you and expanding the way that I have, I realize how this part of me thought how important it was that I integrated this aspect. So I did, but to this point, there's a part of me that's a little bit off, that doesn't want a lot of people to know, because I don't want people to hire me to get a reading as a medium or to talk to their, and because other people do it and I cringe. So that's when you have a shadow, when you cringe when other people and you're triggered when other people are talking about it and you're like, ew. Or when you're with somebody and they're like, oh, your dad told me to this. And I'm like, my dad's not even there. Or, and there's some people that will say like, ooh, I feel like someone's saying, I'm like, ooh, you can see things, right? Like you're able to see all the stuff, and you have that kind of vision. But I can see how sometimes still, after everything I do in chat and whatever, I notice sometimes, like even right now that you ask and you're like, oh, and it just started going that way. Like, what did your dad do? And I'm like, nobody has asked about my dad, mister. And it was interesting because it does, when you're doing this work, there's a part of you that is your truth. Yeah. And if you are not in integration with it, and if you're trying to hide it and whatever, it's just not going to work out. Yeah. And this work is about being whole again and integrating. So we'll make sure because it's this wise part of you that's saying you're here for something bigger. You're here for more things, and you are acting so small when you need to be humble enough and take that bigness, right? Yeah. But not only me, it's everybody.
No, I love it because, and I can relate not from outside, but inside. Because through the course of my life, I've also had this ability that I thought everybody had, that I just didn't realize what everybody didn't have.
Yeah, when you were a kid.
Which was the ability to hear people's soul. Like I hear what the soul is saying without the noise of their interruption. And so I started to, and I fight the voice all the time because I feel this voice inside of me saying, share with them what I'm telling you. And I said, I know them all in about 14 seconds. I'm not going to do that. And it will just increase in volume or increase because we're scared. We're also scared of what we feel and what we see and what we hear. And I sure was, because I have no right to know you for 14 seconds and tell you something as intimate as that your soul is talking to me and wants you to do something.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things with the shadow. When you put a light on the shadow, you get to use it.
Yeah.
It doesn't get to use you. It won't tell you like, say this, because you're going to have boundaries, and you're going to have, you're like, okay, well, not in this moment. It doesn't feel right to me, but we'll get there when we get there. But at least we acknowledge it and we talk to this part. And here we're talking about like something a little bit more like, just that people call woo, which I hated, but I don't know how to call it, like, I don't know, like medium, whatever. But one of the things that I can say is that when you do this work, you're so much more aware of the importance of listening to what makes you feel uncomfortable, because there's gold behind that. There's true gift that wants to shine because something great is coming. Something great is coming.
So what I love about all of this is that one of the key points that I talk about, that the mosaic talked to me about as it was writing itself through me, is that what we see is not what is, it's just what we see. And the moment we see something different, everything that we see becomes different. And I think of those drawings that we see growing up as kids, where, I don't know if you saw it, but they're black and whites, where one way you look at it, it's an old hag.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
The other way you see a socialite, but you can't see them at the same time until you have a change of perception, which allows you to say, no, now I see the socialite, but I can't see the old hag, because something changes. So what it showed me is literally what we see actually blocks us from seeing something else that's right in front of our eyes also. And so whereas the world wants to call what we're talking about woo-woo, what I really want to talk about is just, it's what happens when we start to see. We see things that other people don't see, but that's not woo-woo. That's just the fact that, why would it be woo-woo to have a broader perception of what's available to the reality?
And whatever meaning we want to give to woo-woo, you know, like if it's woo-woo, it's woo-woo, who cares, you know?
Right, totally,
it's like, it's what it is. So, and you know, it's interesting because me being a student of Course in Miracles as well, one of the things that, you know, one of the lessons, it says, you know, I give meaning to what I'm seeing. You know, I give meaning to this table. I give meaning to, so it could undo that. What we see is reality. Like the truth is, we're the ones that giving it meaning, instead of like listening to what really is.
So
like
Monica, why do you think people don't want to see? Why do you think they're scared to see what's in front of their eyes?
Well, it's because it hurt. Like when we were younger, something happened and it hurt. And if it hurt, you're going to do everything it takes to not hurt again.
Yeah.
And so you're going to go through life, you know, if somebody rejected you, or you felt like your mom didn't love you or your dad loved you because he said something, even though you found out later they loved you and you grew up knowing they loved you, but there was that one moment that you said, oh, if I'm not good, or if I don't do this or whatever. So we don't understand this, but there's, you know, there's a lot of adults with a wounded child asking them to not do this, go to the right, because going to the left, you know, this can hurt. So as a child, we created these shadows that are shadow keepers. There are protectors. So it's like, nope, you're not going to go to the left, but to the left is the man of my dream. Yep, nope, let's see if we get something to the right. Yeah. And so every time something or some opportunity or something in your mission, because the shadow is not aligned with your mission and with your truth, but what's behind the shadow is aligned with your message and your truth. So we have to go through the darkness to go into our paths.
So let's talk about that, because that would be a place where we might have, at least initially, we might have some disagreement. Because what I believe is we are the composition of every piece of us, which is what the mosaic is. We are a mosaic. We are made up of every piece. We're made up of the dark and the light. And every single piece is absolutely essential towards our mission. Every single piece we couldn't get to our mission if we separate out a piece from another. And what I find in the work that I do with people is, it's so easy for us to say, that's who I used to be, now this is who I am. But who you used to be and who you are in a world that has no time, which is only this moment, is the same being, just with a different perspective.
Which is a transformed perspective, yes. So where's the part that we don't align?
And so when you say the shadow is not a part of your mission, And I think I understand that when you say the thing behind the shadow is what you have to get your mission. I would probably say that when we get to the point where, for me at least, and this has been my reality, it doesn't have to be anybody else's, when I can sit in those places that are the most painful for me and realize my pain comes not from the things that exist, but from the stories that I've created, that I place on those things that exist, that make those things something other than what they are, just like the old hag becomes the socialite in those pictures. Everything then transforms. So it isn't so much what's happened, it's the stories that I've created around what's happened.
Absolutely. So I still think we're aligned. I think
Okay,
we're
good.
super aligned, because it's not, when I say the shadow is not part of it, the shadow is that part that we need, but we call it shadow because we reject it and we don't want to see it. That's why we call it shadow.
Totally.
So what I'm saying is that rejecting it and pushing it away and whatever, it still serves, because it's part of, sometimes when you push away, you kind of do other things. You learn how to be an expert on going to the right, let's say,
Totally.
right? But if we put a light on it, it aligns to our true mission. And it for me, is this kind of work. I don't want to call it a shortcut, but it's a less suffering way of living, and a more compassionate and loving way of supporting all these aspects of you, so you can support these aspects in other people and see their pain. But first you have to see your pain from, having these shadows, which means these aspects of you that you keep avoiding, projecting, thinking that you don't have them. And we have all the aspects of what a human being has.
So why do you think we create these stories around ourselves that we can't have pain, or we can't have our shadows, or pain isn't good? Because most of the people that I talk to, and I wish it were other, but most of the people that I talk to, a large majority of the people that I talk to, would never be where they are without the pains that have happened in their life. And from the other side of that pain, they look at it and they say, I would never be here without that. And so I'm thankful for it. But going through it, or looking at it before we go through it, we say, oh God, I can't tell anybody about that pain. I don't want to be vulnerable. We believe somehow mystically in this lie that we have to be a certain person, and we have to showcase ourselves to a world that has never experienced any pain, when everybody in the whole world has pain, and everybody in the whole world has their shadow. And when we finally say, hey, come in here and let me hold you, and let me hold your shadow, and I love you with your shadow or without your shadow, everybody goes, sort of like you did when I said, thank you for allowing me the space to talk about that. Right? Which is just the most comforting feeling in the world. Why have we been sort of hypnotized into believing shadow is bad?
Well, here's the thing. There's a distinction, and I know you'll understand this. There's a part of us that has grown in more in this communities that we are, and you've done a lot of work. I've done a lot of work. So there's a part of us that can understand that, let's say, success. The word success came with a lot of failures, right? Like the successful people are the ones that were willing to fall, and they were willing to fall over and over, and they didn't give up, and they came to a successful place. And every successful person I know, they really ate shit the whole way up, right? With other, yummy stuff. But what happens is, when we get to this place of success, for me, what that means is that that's when the shadow appears. Why? Because now this aspect is ready to heal the wounded child that created the shadow. Okay. And now you go back and have this conversation and see with the child, how did it was created? How did it all started? What did it make it mean, right, about him? What did he tell themselves? Like, this is so painful that I'm going to do this, 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 and that, which helped you. Like you said, it's all part of life. So it helped you because you became this, amazing, successful, blah, 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 blah. And it was because of that shadow, but he told himself, if I do things perfectly, or if I did this, I'm going to be loved by my mom because one
Right.
day this happened, whatever. So that shadow was created. So the shadow helped you become the successful, amazing entrepreneur. And it's like, but then at the end, you feel that there's a part missing, right? Like, why don't I feel loved by me, like fully, or this other person, or you're scared that if you don't do it right, this people is going to reject you or abandon you or whatever. So that is where when the shadow appears, like, oh, I've lived my whole life avoiding this pain. I've done it so great to not see and go back to the place where I felt rejected or abandoned or, mistreated or unloved or whatever that was when you were a child.
Mm-hmm.
So the work of the shadow is really listening to this aspect of yourself and really going back to that wounded child, because there's a part of us that says like, I'm like accepting of people. I love people. I'm in this great place. And we're like, why do I suddenly feel these kinds of fears? Well, it's because your inner child, it's still wounded. It needs you now.
Mm-hmm.
And it needs to be accepted by you now. It
Yeah.
needs to be loved by you. And it needs to be healed by, it needs to have a conversation with you. But the one that's going to take you there is the shadow, the uncomfort,
Yeah.
the part that you don't want to be and that you see in others and you
So
hate in
again,
others.
I want to refine that a little bit for me and for the audience. And I love the certainty in which you're talking about. And I also want to say that the shadow is one component of what will take us there, but it's a part of us. The mosaic taught me something, and it's in just listening to the space between the words of the book. It taught me that we really don't know how to connect. We think that connection is just having a conversation like this. And most people, 98% of the people, if I ask them what connection is, would say you sit down and you talk to somebody and you have a connection with them. But there's really 3 stages that come before that. The first stage is the connection to our own self. We have to get to know who we are. And most of my time, I found I spent sabotaging myself, hitting myself, dealing with my shadow or not dealing with my shadow, and sort of always putting myself down. So for people looking on video, I would spend my time just attacking myself, hitting myself, punching myself. And you can hear the sound on the radio. And if you can't see, my hand's about 3 millimeters from my face. And I would never know where I was going to hit myself. I could hit myself in my face, on my feet, in my gut, in my groin. I could hit myself wherever I want. So I had to build a wall to protect myself from myself 3 millimeters away from myself, which allows me no space to interact in the world and really no relationship. So the relationships I was having with people was my wall was meeting your wall, and we thought we were having a relationship. But there was no intimacy in that because you never saw me and I never saw you. Intimacy. And so the first relationship we have to come to is a place where we practice kindness to ourselves. We drop our wall down because we no longer need it to protect ourselves. And suddenly our world exponentially grows a lot. The next relationship we have to have is a connection to something bigger than ourselves. Once we get to know ourselves, we realize, wow, we're a small portion of something much bigger in this world. And I fit into a bigger piece, whether it's the mosaic or the universe or God, whatever you want to call it. I'm just a piece in this whole puzzle. I'm just a piece in this whole mosaic. And when I look to see what source is wanting me to do, then I connect to source. And then when I know what my connection is to myself and to my source, then I have a sense of being open to understand why I'm here, that there's a purpose why I'm here, which is what you spoke about earlier. And sometimes my shadow keeps me from that purpose, and sometimes my shadow opens up that purpose. In my perspective, sometimes I'm scared. I'm scared to deal with what I have to deal with, so I don't look at my shadow. And so I hide behind that shadow and say, I'm not going to do it. And it's only then when we have connection to self, source, purpose, that then we can sit with each other and say, oh, wow, look at you.
Yeah, and this work is all about that. Yeah, this work is all about it, that. I feel like it's the work of coming home, and it's coming home to you, and it does, and it's true. And I am totally, rooting for what you just said, because it's all about the relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And when you're able to hold space for these aspects of you and still be there for you, right? Like at the end of the day, you screwed up and you're like, and I got you. I got you. And you can screw up. You're allowed. And you're allowed to be angry. And you're allowed to be sad. And I'm here next to you.
Yeah.
And I will hold you. I got you. Then you go to the other person, right? Like, hey, I got you. You got me. We got each other,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and with me, and it's not about changing people. It's about if somebody comes over and is sad, you're like, I will hold your hand and I will allow your sadness to be there and see what it has to say to both of us, right?
Yeah.
Versus
I think,
you have to do this course, you have to call Monica, you have to do,
uh,
a lot of people, they're like, I want to have a friend. And I'm like, no, you work with me first.
yeah.
And then you decide if you send me your friend. And then at the end, it's about owning all these aspects and feeling so honored that you've been used with this capacity to love and have compassion and to honor and to connect in such a deep level
Yeah.
that you're so honored that you're going to go out into service and be like, here I am, how can I hold your feeling? Because we live right now, we're in more right now, we're living in a time where people don't accept other people's um, emotions or feelings because they trigger ours.
Yeah.
And we're living in a place where we don't want to feel, with so much medication or alcohol or drugs or sex or even courses or spiritual stuff, and it's a way to not feel and bypass what is super, important for us to really look at. And when you are that compassionate and that loving, shadows are willing to talk and are willing to let go and they just want an open door.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't, and a lot of people think that if you open the door to, like, let's say anger, you're going to be angry to tons of people and whatever. No, it's about you having the relationship with anger and using anger for something else that it's going to bring, that you're going to need. Like right now, we need to be a little bit angry, right? We need to be a little angry to change the planet. Look at what's going on, and look at what's going on in the Amazons, right? It's like, you need to be a little bit angry to have that courage. Because if not, you would be like embarrassed, or you wouldn't say something. But that anger is pushing us to say something, talk about it. Let's have this conversation. Let's talk about what is important. Like, how are we how are we participating in the world? How are we saving it, or how are we destroying it, right?
Yeah.
So, and that goes, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. But it is a very compassionate work, and you do have to own your light and your love and your compassion to do this work. And sometimes, we think that that's the looking at the shadow is the hard part. I think owning your light and owning your power, it's sometimes the most difficult part as
Yeah,
human beings.
I appreciate that. And I think also that what's beautiful about this whole discussion is, if you think about my daughter and what she taught me in the 4 steps of how she relates. She speaks, and when she doesn't get heard, she yells. When she yells and she doesn't get heard, she creates a scene. And when she creates a scene and she doesn't get heard, she destroys. And when you think that we all do that, our anger only comes when we've spoken and we haven't gotten heard, when we've yelled it and we haven't gotten heard, and then we get angry and we create a scene. But we don't have to create that scene. We can go back. If we would just learn to listen, one of the most beautiful things that's coming from my life right now, one of the biggest lessons for me, because I talk so much, is learning how to just listen, and listening to what people are saying behind the words that they say, listening to what the world is saying behind what it's actually communicating, listening to what the wind is saying as it blows on my its breeze on my face, listening to what my wife is trying to say when she says something that doesn't seem to make any sense to me. But everybody's talking to say something, and they want us to hear. And even my daughter, when I couldn't understand her, and finally I looked at her because she was tantruming so much and coming at me so many times, sometimes 10, 12 times a day for 5, 10 years at a time. Finally, I looked at her and I said, Elisa, please try and tell me what you're trying to say a different way. Can you do that? And she just went from the midst of her rage to this beautiful smile and laugh. And she said, I am, Daddy. And I said, you are? How are you doing that? And she pointed to her head. And I said, are you kidding me? Are you putting thoughts in my head? I thought you were doing that, but I didn't trust it. And she went, yes, Daddy. And her rage turned into this explosive Buddha-like laugh that went on for what seemed like days, but was only 2 or 3 minutes probably at a time. Because she just felt heard and understood. And now she never tantrums. Now she never attacks. Because when she seems like she's getting frustrated, we just go like this. And I listen to her. And sometimes I don't hear her, but I try my best to hear her, and she knows I'm trying to hear her. I think in the beauty of you and the work you do is that if we don't listen to that shadow, it will speak to us some way. Even if we don't listen to it, it'll start to yell. It'll start to tantrum. It'll start to create a scene. And we don't need to have that happen. We don't.
Through other people, through the world, through right now it's speaking
through ourselves.
Yeah, and it's this fertile listening, right?
Yes.
That you talk about. It's this fertile listening, because I always tell people when I go and give, if I'm invited to give a talk or whatever, that I don't usually do. I do more like these one-on-ones. I tell them, you have to understand that you are listening to somebody, listening to yourself, listening to somebody, right?
I love it. Love it.
So it's somebody saying something, you're like, oh yeah, and that, oh, my sister should come here. Oh, I like that. Oh, I don't believe in that. And so this little reporter inside. So really you're not in a fertile listening. You're just listening to yourself, listening to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And fertile listening is such, you don't expect anything. You just expect to be a holder of this beautiful space and connection with this other human being. And not only you and your daughter can do this through our mind or through our spirit, we all can do it. Totally. And it would be awesome that when you're fighting with somebody and we turn around and we're like, the truth is whatever's behind all of this other crap that I'm thinking about, it's just that place is that, because at the end of the day, Danny, the truth is that we survive every day by receiving love and extending love. And if during the day we decide somebody doesn't deserve our love, or we get upset with somebody and it hurts, it doesn't hurt because you're upset with somebody. It hurts is because you are blocking that love with someone because you don't think they're deserving. And it happens because in a way we think that if we don't do certain things, we're not deserving of that love. And when that happens, people can absolutely adore you and love you. And you're not going to see it as love. You're going to see it as people that are lying. They're just they're being fake. You're not going to believe it because there's a part of you that doesn't feel that deserves it. And that's where conflict happens. But when you heal yourself, then if somebody tells you they love you and you're like, oh, we're on the same page. Like, I do believe in love at first sight with everybody. I do believe that. I really do. And what I don't believe is what we make up after and how we filter people, because then we stop seeing them. And a lot of people have it backwards. They say like, oh yeah, I saw the great part of them and whatever. And then I really saw how they really were. And I'm like, no, then you saw how they really not.
Right.
And we believed it, and they believed it as well.
Totally. Hey, we're winding down. I could talk to you forever, but we unfortunately have to come to a close. So I have a question that I ask everybody to close the podcast, and that is, when you look out your window and you see the world that's out there, and I know there's some beautiful things that we see, and I know there's some ugly things that you see, but when you look at the world that's out there right now, is this the world you always dreamed of handing over to your children and to your children's children?
Let me tell you what happened to me this morning, that I looked outside the window and I kind of went inside and I asked, am I who I want to be in this moment? Am I who I want to be in this moment for my children, for, my relationship, for am I today that person? Can I be today that person? And I had to really sense that. But if you would have asked me yesterday after I saw a video of Greta, talking about, the planet and what we're doing to that, and I was like bawling.
Right.
But which I don't know if you saw it. I put a post on it.
Global.
Yeah. And I think if I focus in that place, of outside of me and what I'm capable of doing, I think I would be very scared. I think that we are in a place where we have to awaken. We have to see the shadow. We have to let it in. We have to have a conversation. We have to see where in our hearts are we ignoring the call of the planet, the call of our children, the call of the people. And before we can ever hear them and the call of the planet, we're going to have to start listening to our own call, what our soul is yearning and what we don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And really confront that. So at least if our children are not going to last, like us that long, like Greta says, but at least they're going to be with people around them that are going to have a space for them, that it's going to be with less suffering than what it is now.
I love having conversations with empaths who can already feel what I'm going to say. And you already answered the follow-up question, which is, if it's not the world you want to see, what would it look like? What would you want to do to change? And you already answered that. So I really just want to thank you so much. How can people find more about you? And if they're as intoxicated with you as I am, how would they find you?
Thank you. Well, this conversation has been totally different. Usually it goes the other way. So I am honored, and thank you for letting me be in this vulnerable place. They can check out my website, monicapelayo.com. They could also follow me on Facebook. If you're friends with Danny, you're friends with me, and Instagram. But I think my website is pretty much the place to go.
So all of that, and we'll give the website again in the show notes when we put it out. There's also something that if we can get this out quick enough, there's also something that's coming up that you're doing. Let's talk about that.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm having a retreat. It's a women's retreat only. This one, sometimes I have men and women, but this one was called just for women. And you could check it on my website on the event side, and the retreat. It's November the 8th to the 12th.
November or October?
November.
Oh, okay.
But October 1st is the closing because of the place. When you you rent a place, that you rent the rooms and all that stuff. So by October 1st, we have to sign up and reserve the place. So it's in the middle of the jungle, and we have as you know, I have that part Indian, the Mayan part of me. That we're going to be having a cacao ceremony, and we're going to go underneath the water caves, and then we're going to do some shadow work. And it's all about integration. And my intention is to be able, and it is all women, to trust women again, and to recognize sisterhood and the power that it has behind, and being held by other women in such a loving and powerful way can really move you forward to whatever it is that you're doing and in your mission. So thank you for letting me talk about this.
Oh,
absolutely. That was super sweet.
Monica, thank you for all that you're doing and for the work that's going on. I just summarize and want to just say that something like that retreat is so important, because we're in a paradigm shift where the masculine model of ruling this world is changing over into a feminine model of ruling this world. And we really don't have a lot of strong feminine leaders that we can look at that lead from a feminine place, because our model has been a masculine way of leadership. So coming together with women is super important. Coming together to experience your femininity is super important. And even if you can't come and join, and even if you've heard this podcast after that point, just tune into what's going on, because things only happen. They don't only happen in a particular place. They happen through a vibration, and you can feel all that. What I really want to leave you with today is something that the mosaic has left me with, that I keep bumping up with, which is, what would we see if we could see what we don't see? So much of the world we look at in the way, and we're so used to seeing it the way we see it. We do the same thing over and over again, thinking that we're going to get a break and thinking that we're going to have what we want by doing it, but it hasn't been giving us what we want, or it has been giving us what we want, but we feel like there's something missing. What courage does it take to sort of invite ourselves to see our world differently, to take a look at something that is not even outside of us? The beauty of the work that Monica's doing is this change doesn't have to happen from the way you view the things that are happening out there. It's really inviting the voices that live within us to speak to us, to hear those things we're most scared of hearing, to hear that beast that we've put away, that shadow that wants to talk to us, that shadow that wants to shed light on something that will free up a whole nother world for us to see. What are we blocking from our reality that if we opened up to that reality would make our reality maybe more beautiful? It might be more painful too. But no matter what it is, beautiful or painful, it's ours. And there's something beautiful in being able to stand in front of the mirror and stand in front of the world and say, here I am, for better or worse. I'm an old man with a big belly, and it's okay. It doesn't matter, because what I do is I love to the best of my ability. I love the totality of who I am and what I give. And if you're having questions around what your shadow is saying, what it would feel like to delve deep into what that's like, Monica's an expert in this. Contact her, please. Go to her website, take a look at the work that she's doing, and allow her to just be a mirror for you, to allow you to see voices within you that are dying to be heard. I call it The Beast. I'd love you to get a copy of the book, The Mosaic. Also, it's on Amazon, and read about it, read about the characters of the Beast. Go to my website, themosaiconline.com. Also, join the work that we're doing, which is to end human suffering and global suffering worldwide, by going to themosaicswarm.com. All that will be in the show notes. But for now, I want to just invite you and encourage you to take a moment, even right now, to invite those things that you don't see to become visible. What would you see if you saw differently? Thank you for being here, Monica. Again, thank you to you. Thank you, listeners, for being here and being a part of our conversation. If you like this show, please like it on YouTube, on iTunes, I mean. And if you want more, we're here. Contact Monica, contact me. Until then, peace out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.